Hello everyone, this is Gene from NYC again, and I'm back with I believe it's the third video of the day. There was my response to Jason Aaron about his take on She-Hulk in the Avengers 20 issue that just came out. Then there was my video on whether or not Melissa McCarthy is a good choice for the character of Ursula the Sea Witch, who is the main villainess in the film The Little Mermaid, which is going to be getting a live-action rendition soon. So yes, I do believe this is the third video. This is a video by request. I believe Joel Prince or Joel Price. Forgive me if I get your name wrong. And as always, whether you are new to the channel or whether you've always been here, welcome to the channel. Because each video is different. But there's one thing that is consistent, is that I get in way too deep and it goes way too long. I can't help myself. I have thoughts and opinions, and I explain things too much and say the same thing over 3 times, but that's my charm. But anyway, what Joel or Joel, I'm not quite sure how you say it. I'm going to go with Joel, but if that's wrong, please let me know. Excuse me. Requested is my thoughts and my response to a blog post Sina Grace made recently. If you're not aware, because not everybody that is a subscriber to my channel follows comic books, Sina Grace is an illustrator and most recently a comic writer. He's currently, or at least he last, worked for Marvel. I don't know if he's still with Marvel. I haven't heard anything about him, but he last worked with Marvel, and of note, he most recently wrote a solo series on the character of Iceman. If you don't know who Iceman is, he's a well-known and long-tenured member of the XMan. If I remember correctly, he's one of the original X-Men, like the original 5 from the mid or late 60s when the X-Men first came out. His real name is Bobby Drake, right? One of his character tropes or issues is that he's the Iceman, right? He's cold, he can turn his body into ice, he can make ice. He's the Iceman, but he has a hot head, right? He's known for being a bit rebellious, he doesn't like authority, he's often clashed with Professor Xavier, right? There's this long history with him. Way too long to summarize in a video. But what happened recently, prior to Sina Grace coming on, so I should say that. But prior to Sina Grace coming on to write the character, Bobby's sexuality was retconned, right? He was sexuality flipped. Up until, 2017, I believe it is, Bobby was heterosexual. He was straight, right? He has a weakness, like many men do, or he had a weakness, like many men do, for beautiful women. Eventually, a storyline was written where Jean Grey, there were like 2 versions of Jean Grey at this point. It was odd. But you had sort of like a child or teen version of Jean Grey, then you had the adult Jean Grey, and I believe it's the child version of Jean Grey. She basically went into Bobby's mind, right, and rewrote his sexuality. Took him from straight to gay. Right? The story tries to justify it by saying that, she found his, deepest secrets and desires or whatever it was. But let's be honest. She mind raped him. A powerful psychic, the Phoenix, the woman who is the definition of the Phoenix Force, invaded a man's mind, took what is at best maybe a stray errant thought, and used it to completely rewrite his sexuality. This change to Bobby, right? Such a big change too, right? It's not just like a change to his look or his costume or an addition or a subtraction from his power set. You've changed his sexual orientation. His sexual identity was changed. In a time when sexual identity is so important to the outrage crowd, a character that again is a powerful telepath went into a man's mind and forcibly changed his sexuality. Right? And that's not Grace's fault. I don't think he was part of that. I don't think he was writing for the character at the time. But still, this did happen. Right? Marvel thought it was okay to do this to a well-known, long-standing, beloved character. And this has been a root of controversy with the character ever since. Right? Many fans, myself included, were not happy with this. I can tell you for myself that if I were going to make Bobby gay, I wouldn't do that. Because I don't see the point. Just make a new character who happens to be gay instead of literally sexuality swapping or sexuality flipping an established character. But let's say I worked for Marvel and this is what they tasked me to do. If I was going to reveal that Bobby is gay or has gay tendencies or leanings or whatever, I would probably make him bisexual. To be honest, if I had to, I'd probably argue for him to at least be bi, so that you wouldn't totally erase his female romantic relationships. But back to the point. If I was forced by Marvel to do this, and I have no way out, I don't quit or I won't quit, right? Maybe I can't quit, right? If basically circumstances are forcing me to do this, right? Worst case scenario. You know what I would have done? I would have written a love story. I would have introduced a character. Could be a regular guy, could be a fellow superhero, could be a new superhero. Right? I could introduce, or rather reintroduce North Star, or I could create a new character, who knows. But I would write a love story. Bobby would meet this person, they would become friends, right? And over time, over the issues, Bobby would find himself falling in love. And then, like most normal people who finally find themselves falling in love, not just with a person that they normally wouldn't, but with a person who does not fit their previously set or known, romantic or sexual taste. Right? If you are male and you've been dating women all your life, and suddenly you find yourself falling deeply in love with a man, naturally, you're going to question it. And that's exactly what I would have done. Have Bobby question it. What does this say about him? Is he really bi? Is he gay? What about his relationships with women? Have they all been a lie? Did he ever really care about them? Did he ever truly love them? Right? Is it a case of he fell in love with the person and the person just happens to be male? There are so many different questions that you have to ask and that you have to answer when you do something like this. When you take something, again, that is, just think about it in the real world, right? If you fell in love with somebody who is completely opposite of what you are normally attracted to, and I don't mean stuff like you date blondes but you fall for a brunette. I mean, again, if you're straight and suddenly you find yourself falling in love with the opposite, with the same sex, or to flip it, if you are, say, gay, right, or lesbian, and you find yourself falling in love with a member of the opposite sex, right, a regular, well-adjusted, sane person would find themselves going, oh, hold up, wait a minute, what does this say about me? Has everything about my life in this area of life been a lie? Why is this happening? How is this happening? Right? Those issues were at times brought up in Sina Grace's version of Iceman, but they were never really properly addressed, in my view. Right? What I feel Sina Grace did was basically write an offensive gay stereotype. He didn't write the character of Bobby Drake, right, who just happens to now be gay. He wrote Jack McFarlane from Will and Grace and gave him ice powers. And then he made him more annoying and offensive than the character of Jack already is. Right, so that is basically my opinion of the change to Iceman and what Sina Grace's Iceman run, both runs, were about. And to summarize this blog post that he made I believe Sina Grace is whiny, which does not surprise me. I think that he's a creative. He's a creative in a very small, tight-knit industry that is sinking, right? And if you're familiar with creative industries or professions, right, pursuits, whether it be writing, singing, making music, even pro wrestling, right? There's a certain creativity to that. Creatives are known for being very moody and temperamental and not always acting in the most mature way. That is basically what I feel about Sina Grace's blog post. I feel that he's just whining, right? He had what he views to be a negative experience because he feels, right? Talk about what he feels, right? Not considering the broader picture or the company's perspective, just what he feels, right? And he didn't feel support, and he didn't get this, and he didn't get that. So I think overall, he's just whining, which does not surprise me. But despite that, I'm going to read his blog post. And what I'm going to do is a read and react. So I'm going to read, and then when something catches my attention, I'm going to respond to it in real time. Right? So you get a true idea of what I think about this particular blog post. And I will be posting a link to the blog in the video description so that you can read this and decide for yourself, whether I'm being fair, whether I'm being unfair, whether it's somewhere in the middle, whatever it is. I don't want you to just hear my opinion on him or on what happened in the comic. I want you to look into it for yourself. So here it goes. Alright, so again, this is going to be a read and react. So it's going to be in real time. So there's going to be, switches and shifts. I'm going to try to keep it as clear as possible and make it and try to differentiate between when I'm reading what he's saying or when I'm reacting to what he said. Okay, so this is from SinaGrace.com. This is his blog. And it reads, as Pride Month comes to a close, it's time I spoke candidly about my experience at Marvel Comics. Here's my first issue. He mentions as Pride Month comes to a close. Why did he wait a good, 5-6 months? The last issue of the solo series Iceman run was in January. I know because I did a review of it in January. You want to scroll back to the videos, you'll find it. I reviewed Iceman number 5. I did not like Iceman number 5. So he's had a good 5-6 months to stew on this. Why did he wait nearly half a year to now mention this? I think it's obvious. Pride Month. He's gay. Bobby's gay. He wants to try to make some sort of stand. At least that's my opinion. Or bring light to an issue that he seems to believe exists because of the sexuality of both his sexuality and the sexuality of one Bobby Drake. This is how I take it. So, continuing. To date, I've always been honest about the joy of writing Iceman's journey as an out gay superhero, but I've skirted around the challenges that came along with it. Okay, here's the second thing I take issue with. He says here that he's writing about Iceman's journey as an out gay superhero. Bobby Drake is not an out gay superhero. He was not living in the closet previously and in denial. I don't care what Marvel says. I've read Marvel comics for decades. Bobby was not living in the closet. He wasn't gay. As I explained earlier in the video, he was forcibly made gay by a powerful telepath. More importantly, we all know damn good and well they would never tolerate this for any gay character or any character who is not straight. If you were to have the same thing happen, right, have Jean Grey overwrite someone's sexuality, but she did it to, say, North Star, or to Dakin, or to Mystique, right? Characters who are not straight. If you don't know, North Star is gay, right? And Mystique and Daken, I believe, are bisexual. So if they did that, right, to any of those three, if they took Jean Grey, had her take an errant thought and rewrite their sexualities to straight, there would have been, I can't even imagine the backlash that would have happened, right? So please, don't feed me that BS of you were writing a out gay superhero, Mr. Grace. You were not writing an out gay superhero. You were writing a straight man who was forcibly made gay. Continuing. This is partially because I prefer to give off an upbeat vibe, and there's also a fear that my truth will affect my career. I'm wondering at the moment if you're telling the truth. I understand that you're telling things from your perspective, but I'm not quite sure you're telling the truth, Mr. Grace. Continuing. With more corporations patting themselves on the back for profit-led partnerships wherein celebrities take selfies in rainbow apparel, and with buzz that Marvel Studios is preparing to debut their first gay character in the upcoming Eternals movie, there is an urgency to discuss the realities of creating queer pop culture in a hostile or ambivalent environment. Okay, a few things. I actually do agree with him about how Pride is being commercialized. It's being commercialized because it's becoming mainstream. And as a geek, as someone who has watched video games become more mainstream, and as someone who has watched comic books become more mainstream, that's actually probably the worst thing that could happen to the gay community, is to become mainstream. I'm not saying generally accepted. I'm talking about becoming mainstream. Because what happens when something that is niche or was formerly a subculture becomes mainstream, what happens is that everything that made that subculture or that niche unique, everything that gave it its own separate, unique identity gets stripped away. And it really becomes a parody of itself. Because it becomes not an actual subculture or a niche or things that people are really interested in and have a real connection to. It becomes a marketing tool. I've seen it with video games. I've seen it with comic books. The worst thing that ever happened to comics was the MCU. Not because the MCU has bad films, but because the MCU caused Marvel to go from making comic books to just basically being an IP farm. So I actually agree with him there about the corporatization, is that the term? And the commercialization of Pride and of the cultures and subcultures within the LGBTQ community. Right? Now, I disagree with him here about the realities of creating queer pop culture in a hostile or ambivalent environment. You're going to need more than just saying that to prove to me that the current environment, okay, I'm not talking about the 1990s or the 1980s or the 1950s, I'm talking about current year, okay. For those who may not know, Sina Grace wrote 2 miniseries, right, on Iceman. He wrote one, I think, back in 2017, going into 2018, then he wrote a second one after it was brought back. The first one was canceled at, I think, around 11 issues. Right, so it ran for almost a year, and then it was brought back in September of last year, in September of 2018, and it ran until January of this year. So the first run was around 11 issues, so almost a year, which, while I don't think it was good from a creative standpoint, if we're talking just about longevity, given that many mainstream titles don't last all that long. And the fact that he was able to get to 11 issues is pretty impressive, to be honest. Getting to 11 issues when you're writing a solo series about a character who is well known to fans, but isn't exactly that big famous character. I mean, he's not, for example, Wolverine, right? So to get to that, to get to 11 issues, and then to have the series resurrected, and then given, it was supposed to be a 6-issue run, to my knowledge, but the 6th issue never came out. I think it got absorbed into some sort of greater story or something like that, but I know that there was no official 6th issue to close out the second version of the Iceman solo series. So there's that. So I would like to know, where you get 2 chances, how hostile or ambivalent the environment is at Marvel Comics or in comics in general. Right, so I question what he's trying to imply here. Continuing. Hopefully, my takeaways will serve as a guide for people in positions of power to consider when advocating for more nuanced and rich representation. Here is what ticks me off. I read several issues, not every issue, but several issues of the Iceman run, of both runs that he did. I did a review of issue 5. I saw many reviews, right, from Just Some Guy and DNC and others who are not Comicsgate, right? They all point out the same thing: the lack of nuance. There was no nuance. That was one of the huge problems I had with Mr. Grace's version of Iceman. There was no nuance, none at all. It was not an examination, at least from my perspective. It was not an examination of a man in his mid-30s, right, discovering or maybe coming to terms with, his true sexual orientation, I guess you could say, right, if we're looking at things from Sina Grace's perspective. This was not a story about that. This was not a coming out story. They tried to write a coming out story for this. I read it. It was awful. I think it was issue 2 or 3, right? It was an awful story. It had a nice ending with Bobby and his father making amends after they had a huge fight earlier. But overall, it was not a good story. Okay, but you, with all due respect, Mr. Grace, you didn't write a coming out story. You didn't write a coming of age story, right? You didn't write anything like that. I don't know what to call what you wrote other than refuse. Trash. There was no plot, no development, no story elements. There was nothing that I could learn about life or about Bobby. There was nothing. There was just nothing there. Nothing. You can't even call it junk food, because the whole thing about junk food is that it tastes good. It's bad for you, right? It's not healthy for you, but at least it tastes good and it gives you a little bit of pleasure. That didn't happen here. So I can't even say that this is equivalent to junk food. It was just bad writing. That's all it was. It was bad. It was refuse. It was trash. But anyway, where was I? Rich representation. Oh. In an ideal world, embracing our stories and empowering us to tell them will yield far more profitable and way less messy results than what I encountered while writing Iceman. Again, Mr. Grace, again, you were given 2 chances at this. 2 chances. You were given, if we just count total issues, right, for the solo series, what 16? In one run, your first run lasted almost a year? And you're telling me that, that you were not empowered, right, to tell your story? You had 16 issues and 2 attempts to tell your story, right? You were empowered by Marvel to tell your story via Iceman. Don't blame them if you bungled it. Okay, don't blame them for you not writing something that could actually grow and become a hit. That's not their fault. I blame Marvel for a lot of things, right? I even blame Marvel for a lot of the editing issues with those Iceman issues. But please, don't give me this BS of embracing our stories and empowering us. Your stories have been embraced. You have been empowered. Don't lie to me, and more importantly, don't lie to yourself. But anyway, continuing. Stand by your people. It's no surprise that I got the attention of trolls and irate fans for taking on this job. There was already backlash around the manner in which Bobby Drake, aka Iceman, came out, and Marvel needed to smooth that landing and put a "so what" to the decision. Yeah, I'm not going to say that he was never trolled, but what he means by trolls is, of course, people in Comicsgate, right? Diversity in comics, just some guy, right? People who will not spare your feelings, right? People who don't give a damn about how you feel and who will roast you, but who will also make points, make pointed points, like redundant, I know, I couldn't think of anything better, but who will point out what is wrong and what the issue is, right? That's what he means. He doesn't like the fact that critics criticized him. That's the way I see it. And yes, there would certainly irate fans because, again, sorry for the city noise, because, again, the way Bobby came out and discovered he was gay was not through a natural process of trial and error or internal introspection and questioning of oneself and one's identity when encountering a unique situation that they've never been in before, like the hypothetical love story I was talking about earlier. Again, a powerful telepath forcibly rewrote his sexuality. So yes, I can understand why people were irate. Alright, so moving on. After a point, I could almost laugh off people making light of my death, saying they have cancerous AIDS from my book, or insinuating I'm capable of sexual assault. Yes, I checked those tweets. Yes, those people were mean. Those tweets were mean. But that's all they are, Sina. Mean tweets. Right? You have celebrities coming on TV on the Jimmy Kimmel show who make fun of these, right, by reading them out loud and showing them just how stupid they are. Okay, I read these. There was no threat on your life. Okay, nobody was threatening to dox you. People were being hyperbolic. Like the one about cancerous AIDS. People were being hyperbolic about the poor quality of your work. Anyway, continuing. Between Iceman's cancellation and subsequent revival, so he admits it, Marvel reached out and said they noticed threatening behavior on my Twitter account, only after asking me to send proof of all the nasty S, right, popping up online. Okay, what did you expect them to do? They did what they were supposed to do. They noticed concerning activity on your online account, on your Twitter account, right? Then they said, hey, could you show us what's happening? Could you, give us proof so that no doubt so that they could have it documented. Okay, I don't see, and maybe it's because of my professional experience working in a compliance office in a college where, yes, we do ask for proof of what you say, right? If you have emails, texts, letters, Facebook posts, whatever, yeah, we will ask, hey, if you're saying, for example, X person is harassing you online and you're saying that it happened on Facebook, yeah, we are going to ask for the Facebook post so we can see it. So we can see exactly what's being said, what you're saying and what the other person's saying, because we don't automatically believe you just because you say something. We don't automatically disbelieve you, but we don't automatically believe you either. As the saying goes, trust but verify. And if anybody's wondering, the office that I work in, that I have worked in for, 7 years now, right? It's mainly been staffed by women. Myself, 2 of my 3 supervisors while I've been there have been female, and now recently, a few months ago, another woman came on, very nice lady, to help out my supervisor with her load. In particular, looking into allegations of violations of school policy, like the sexual harassment policy and non-discrimination and all that stuff. So the real serious big stuff. I don't really deal with that all that much, though I am called in at times. But my supervisor and basically her assistant of sorts, they handle all that. So you have an office, staffed by 3 women, and every time someone brings up a complaint or an allegation, what we say is, we hear them out, we ask them, okay, if they bring up stuff like, for example, someone sent me this text, or someone, said this about me online, right? What we say is, can you produce it? Can you send us those texts? Can you send us those emails? Can you send us those tweets or Facebook posts? Okay, so Marvel, in my experience, in my professional experience, Marvel asking Mr. Grace, right, to send proof is not out of line. So why he seems to be offended by it is beyond me. Anyway, continuing, an editor called. These conversations always happen over the phone, offering to provide tips and tricks to deal with the cyberbullying. I cut him off. All he was going to do was tell me how to fend for myself. Yeah. Because you can't stop people from writing stuff unless you plan to mute everybody, or you plan to get rid of your online presence, or you plan to not have comments or not allow for response, right? Unless you are going to close off your Twitter to any sort of interaction, you're going to have people who come and who say things, right? Who are mean or who are trolls. So yes, I don't see the problem in whomever this editor was telling you tips and tricks to deal with the cyberbullying, as you call it. I question whether or not it was truly cyberbullying, but let's say for the sake of argument it is. Again, why is it wrong for him to tell you how to protect yourself? How do you deal with literal bullying? Because usually involving other people or involving authorities like the principal or whatever doesn't work. In the end, how do you deal with a bully? You have to defend yourself. You have to fight back on your own. No help. You have to prove that you can stand on your own 2 feet. So if that's how it works in the real world, why wouldn't it be all that different, or why wouldn't it be very similar in the online world too, which is, again, inhabited by the same people, right? So I don't understand what, again, Mr. Grace is so upset about here. So it continues, I needed Marvel to stand by me with more work opportunities to show the trolls that I was more than a diversity hire. You were a diversity hire. You were hired because of your sexuality. You were put on a character featuring a gay man. That is a gay man because of your sexuality. Even if they had given you if they had given you more work, Mr. Grace, you were not going to escape that label, because to many people, myself included, that label is the truth. So, continuing, where was I? Oh. We'll keep you in mind. I got so tired of that sentence. Question, Mr. Grace. Who are you? I really want to know who you are, that the sentence will keep you in mind should be insulting to you. Are you Chris Claremont? Are you John Byrne? Are you Todd McFarlane? Hell, are you Dan Slott? Are you Mark Wade? Are you anybody who has any sort of standing or clout in the business? Are you someone who has valid reason to be offended by the phrase, "will keep you in mind"? What's that I hear? Nothing? No response? That's what I thought. You're no one special, Mr. Grace. You're no one special. You didn't do anything special with the character of Iceman. You didn't turn it into some long-running comic book. You're a comic writer who worked at a comic writing company. You're one of many. You haven't done anything or haven't done enough yet to stand out and to suddenly deserve a higher level of respect or treatment. You know why they told you we'll keep you in mind? Because they were probably keeping you in mind. Again, you're not some sort of big name that they have to cater to first. Get off your high horse. Continuing, even after a year of the new editor-in-chief, for those who don't know, that would be C.B. Cebulski, saying I was talented and needed to be on a book that wasn't the gay character, the only assignment I got outside of Iceman was 6 pages long, about a version of Wolverine where we had diamond claws. Fabulous, yes. Heterosexual, yes. Still kind of the gay character, though. I'm guessing he's saying that this version of Wolverine that I am not familiar with was the gay character because of the diamond claws. That's the only thing I can think of. More importantly, this is one of the parts of this that angers me the most because he got an opportunity to prove himself. He got what he asked for. He doesn't want to write a gay character. So what happens? They put him on a version of one of the most heterosexual, manly, masculine characters that exist in Marvel. They put him on my favorite character. Wolverine is my favorite character in all of comics. In Marvel, in the X-Men, in DC, in all of comics. For me, there is Wolverine and there's everyone else. Do you know what I would have done if I was in his place? If I worked at Marvel and someone at Marvel says, hey, Gene, we want you to write 6 pages of this Wolverine comic that we're working on. I am going to turn in my heart and soul. This is Wolverine. I don't care if he has diamond claws. I am devoting every ounce of free time that I have on writing this character and making him the absolute best version of Wolverine that I can. That would be a dream come true for me to write any version of Wolverine. And he's going to complain. He had his chance. He was given a chance. But because it wasn't what he wanted, I'm not even sure Sina Grace knows what he wants. But because it wasn't what he wanted, he wants to complain. It was still the gay character, though. You're put on a version of Wolverine. What I wouldn't give. And you're still going to complain. This is entitlement, and this is lack of appreciation 101. You're making me defend Marvel, Sina Grace. I don't like Marvel currently. Yet, your pettiness and your entitlement is making me feel sympathetic toward them and defend them. You don't want me to be on Marvel's side. You want me to be on your side. Anyway, continuing. Excuse me. We as creators are strongly encouraged to build a platform on social media and use it to promote work-for-hire projects owned by massive corporations. But when the going gets tough, these dudes get going real quick. Yeah, you work freelance. You work to promote a product that is not your own. Am I supposed to be upset? Am I supposed to be upset? What is this? Am I supposed to feel sorry for you? More importantly, he keeps making these claims that he doesn't show anything. The only thing he shows are the tweets. In the article itself, there are links to the 3 tweets, the one about Cancerous Aid and something else. Right, but otherwise, right, he doesn't provide any other proof that he was somehow abandoned. That's what it seems to me that he's trying to say, that he was abandoned and left to dry by Marvel Comics. So anyway, number 2, well, next header. Believe in the work. You may be asking if my Iceman book was any good, or if I'm just being sour grapes over a bad work experience. I read it, I saw reviews. You are being sour grapes. You're being terribly sour grapes. And you're just griping. I'm not even sure if it's a bad work experience because I haven't heard anything yet that was particularly bad, and I've read through this thing. I didn't see anything particularly bad or egregious. I just see what I think is that this is how Sina Grace perceives things. I don't think it was a bad working experience. I don't think he got the praise or the success that he wanted. He was probably trying to fail upwards, like a lot of writers at Marvel and DC and in comics general do, and since he didn't get as high as he wanted and didn't get the praise that he wanted, he's now salty. That's what I think. Believe me, I asked that too. From the get-go, my first editor asserted that Iceman would be dead on arrival if it were too gay, while also telling me to prepare for a cancellation anyway, given that most solo X-Men titles don't last beyond a year. Yeah, he was right. I don't know about the too gay thing, considering that, as Sina will mention himself, he later on introduced a drag queen superhero named Shade, now known as Darkveil. But yeah, the rest of it is true. It lasts, if you're lucky, for about a year. Solo X titles, with the exception of Wolverine, don't last long. That's not new. That's not new. You can go back to the 90s. There was a Rogue miniseries in the mid-1990s, I think 1995. Only had about 4 issues. There was a Storm miniseries back in 1995. Only had about, I think, between 4 and 6 issues. I think there was a Storm solo series written by Claremont himself, if I remember correctly, in 2014. That didn't last long. Solo X character solo series like Iceman, Rogue, Storm, whatever, right, that are basically not named Wolverine, don't last all that long. Odd story. Don't know why that happens. Wolverine is just the one that can go on forever, right? It was a huge comic book, went on for years and years and years in the 1990s. But to my knowledge, he's pretty much the only X-Men character who's had that sort of solo success. That's not an indictment on the other writers or on those characters themselves. Rogue is a great character. Storm is a great character. They just don't. They just aren't really strong enough to carry their own series. Wolverine is. That's not good or bad. It just is what it is. So what am I trying to say? So that Iceman only lasting about a year the first time is part of the course, and I don't remember the editor for the first run that Sina did, but whoever that person was, he was right. Okay, so here's what it says. Continuing, never mind that my work on Iceman had gotten positive press in the New York Times in print, or that in spite of, since deleted, critical sandbagging, the series nets glowing reviews on Amazon, Marvel still treated me as someone to be contained, and the book was something to be nervous about. The book was something to be nervous about, Sina, because it was featuring a very controversial character that had just undergone a very controversial change. And last I checked, comic fans don't look to the New York Times or to Amazon for recommendations. So why you're trying to flex by mentioning those two companies is beyond me. But anyway, continuing, it says, do you know how hard it is to not argue with a publicist when he's explaining the value of announcing Iceman's revival via the Marvel homepage? What did you want? What did you want, Sina Grace? Seriously, what the hell did you want? You're talking about a publicist announcing Iceman's revival, meaning that the first series ended, and then there was a second one. It was brought back. I don't know who the hell requested it, but it was brought back, and you're complaining about having to hold your tongue when talking to a publicist that was announcing that the book was coming back on the Marvel homepage. You got the homepage. Am I the only one who is amazed by how entitled this man is? No wonder he wrote Bobby. Sina Grace wrote Bobby as an immature brat, and now I can see why. Now I can see why. And continuing. Sis, that's a burial. Oh, to be Gala right now. But anyway, instead of clapping back, I just went and got myself more press from the New York Times. From there, they tightened my leash. Again, he gives no example of how his leash was tightened, and again, going to the New York Times means nothing to a comic fan. Comics fans don't go to the New York Times for recommendations and reviews. So again, weird flex. Not only a weird flex, Cena, but a weak flex. Okay, really, don't flex if you don't have muscles, because it just looks bad. You just look like an imitator. Don't do it. It's bad news. Anyway, I had to get all opportunities pre-approved and all interviews pre-reviewed. This would be fine if it were the standard, but I assure you, none of my straight male colleagues seek permission to go on podcasts promoting their books. Oh, Cena, you give me absolutely no reason to believe you. Did you talk to your straight male colleagues? Did you ask them what they have to go through when it comes to interviews or appearing on podcasts or things of that nature? Or did you just see what you thought to be in inequality and injustice and assume that's the way it was? Now, I'll admit, I'm leaning toward the latter. He could have spoken to his male colleagues. He might have. I just doubt it. Anyway, continuing. What Marvel should have done is assign me a special projects editor. They should have worked with a specialty PR firm rather than repeat a tiresome cycle of treating the book like a square peg and getting confused when it's a hit. Number one. Again, who the hell are you? Who the hell are you to set the standards and to demand things of Marvel? Why are you so special that you should have received a special projects editor, and why are you so special that Marvel should have gone out of their way to work for a specialty PR firm? And you want to talk about a hit? Okay, this is what you said. And getting confused when it's a hit. I looked up the second run. I went to Comic-Con and I looked up the units sold for the second run, right? Second run started in September of 2018, ended in January 2019. 5 issues. Now, for those who are not familiar with comics, Comic-Con tracks sales, but it tracks sales to comic book stores. There is no way, at least to my knowledge, there is no way to track how many individual customers, buy issues, right? No one knows exactly how many customers bought how many issues. No one knows how many issues actually sold to buyers, to the customer, to the people who come to the comic shops. What is known and what is reported on are the units sold to comic book shops. That is what's known. So keep in mind that when I read off the units sold here, it's units sold to comic book stores, not units sold to individual customers in those comic shops. So we have issue 1, which debuted in September of 2018, right? So remember, this is an issue 1. It's going to be a bit inflated anyway because it's an issue 1. There's over shipping. There's comic collectors who always buy number 1s, in the off chance that the comic will be a big hit and then it's a collector's item 20 years down the line. So keep that in mind. So first issue, units sold, 38,902. Not bad. Now we have the second issue, October 2018, 12,941 units sold. I want to repeat that. The second issue of Iceman sold 12,941 units to comic book stores after having an opening, right, issue 1 of 38,902. drop-off is always expected, right? But this is one steep fall between a month. Now, here are the sales figures, the units sold for issue 3 from November 2018. 11,468. Issue 4, December 2018. 10,479. Issue 5, the last issue of the solo series, debuted in January 2019. 9,800 units sold to comic book shops. There was a consistent decline, right? There was that steep drop between the first issue and the second issue, and then there was a consistent decline in units shipped, in other words, units ordered by the comic shops, right, in each month following. Hence why it's currently canceled. So I want to know, Sina, where is this a hit? Where is consistently dipping sales considered a hit? Tell me in what bizarre world that consistently failing sales, selling less and less each month, is a hit. It's not a hit, it's a recipe for disaster. It is a recipe for cancellation. And that is exactly what happened. Continuing, give us a real seat at the table. There was a moment before Iceman was canceled where I wrote then editor-in-chief Axel Alonso. I'm assuming he means during the first run. Because for the second run, I think if not all of it, most of it, if not all of it, C.B. Cebulski, who's the current editor-in-chief, I believe he was editor-in-chief for the second run. So I'm assuming Sina here is talking about the first run that was 11 issues, was just under a year. So anyway, getting back to it, he was saying, there was a moment before Iceman was canceled where I wrote then editor-in-chief Axel Alonso an email, pleading for a Hail Mary arc. I explained that Iceman was landing with a newer generation of readers who focus more on binge reading than month-to-month periodicals. The series needed more time in the book market before its true strength could be assessed. Well, as I cited with those sales figures, I don't know about being a hit, but Sina might have a point with a newer generation of readers who focus more on binge reading than month-to-month periodicals. He actually might have a point there. I mean, for example, binge watching is a huge thing now, right? That's what people do on Netflix. They just take a weekend and watch an entire series. So he actually might have had a point there about differing the advertising strategy. I'll give him credit for that. He noticed a trend, and he pitched an idea to the editor-in-chief. I can't fault him there. I agree with him on that one. So let's see here. To Axel's credit, he was warm to the idea and even gave me an extra month. But when he left Marvel, that idea got brushed away. Well, yeah, that's what happens. He left, CB came in, and CB came in with a bit of controversy himself. If you follow comics, you probably remember the whole thing about his manga, Asian identity, and all this other stuff. But yeah, it's called Meet the New Boss, right? That's what happens when the old boss leaves, a new boss comes in, and they at times institute new policies and new ways of doing things, right? And sometimes, your old boss thought that what you said was a great idea. Second boss, may disagree, or he's ambivalent. Okay, that happens. Okay, there are changes in working structures and people coming and going. That's known to all walks of work life. What, again, am I supposed to feel bad for you that CB apparently didn't take on your idea about binge reading? Okay. What do you want me to say? I don't know. Right? Of course I was right. The first 2 volumes sold like gangbusters thanks to word of mouth, librarian love, and support from retailers big and small. I'll give you the librarian thing. I will give you that. I don't know about support from retailers, especially since the retailers are mainly comic book shops, and comic book shops are a dying breed. More and more close each day, right? And I don't know about gangbusters, but yeah, here it says the first 2 volumes, right? Now maybe you have a point there. Maybe they should. Maybe the trade paperback is better for your type of story. But again, what am I supposed to feel bad for you? That C.B. Cebulski didn't pursue an idea that you had pitched to Axel Alonso? Did you even pitch the idea again to CB? Because you didn't say that you pitched it to CB. You're not saying that I went to the new editor-in-chief and said A, B, and C, and then he shot me down. Right? All you said was that when Axel Alonso was let go, your idea was brushed away. Anyway, continuing. When the series returned, no one at Marvel asked me, "What do you think landed with readers?" Nor did they ask the question that Alonso did. What matters to your community? So you were expecting someone who was new to the position of editor-in-chief to approach you, to ask you. You're expecting the new boss to just approach you, some person he does not know, and ask for your opinion. Did you ever think of maybe writing him an email and pitching the idea? Right? Like, how do I explain it? This reminds me of this concern or this stereotype, right? That for example, women will not ask for a raise, right? That they will not promote themselves or pitch themselves and put themselves in line for a raise. That they won't speak up, right? This is one of the things that all these pro-women movements always harp on. You know, men need to ask women this. Men need to promote more women. They never want to focus on the fact that women need to step up and simply ask for what they want, or make a pitch or make a presentation that says, "Hey, this is a really good idea," right? Here's why it's a really good idea. And the reason I bring this up, right, because you may be wondering why am I mentioning that. I bring this up because Sina Grace did the same thing. Given his own words, right, he wanted someone at Marvel to ask him. He does not show or display, at least in the way he's describing it, that he showed any initiative. He wanted someone at Marvel to do what Axel did, to come to him and ask him questions. Instead of him asking them questions, instead of him promoting himself, promoting his ideas, he decided to sit and be compliant and wait. And now he's upset that his idea that he never pitched again to new management wasn't picked up. Again, do you want me to feel bad for you? Because I don't, Mr. Grace. If this blog post was about having the reader feel sympathetic toward you and whatever imagined slights you went through, you really failed here, man. Anyway, continuing. So then I wrote what I thought the fans would be into. A story about a man learning to be a better ally in the war against hate. Editorial totally missed its value. Given what I've read of what you wrote, I don't think it would have been a good story. Anyway, continuing. Seat at the Table Part 2. The shade of it all. Yas, Queen, Sly. That's not in here. I just added that. So shout out to my man Mim Headroom. I do hope that you will come back to us with your unique English wit and your humor again. Good luck on your PhD or whatever the heck it was you were working toward. Anyhow, getting back to Sina's blog post, all of the weird drama I put up with crystallized when I created a drag queen mutant, first called Shade, now called Dark Veil. I told my editor that Shade would be a big deal for X fans, and asked how we should promote her. He said, "Leave it up to the reader's interpretation." Okay, I don't see a problem here. He said, let the fans interpret what shade is. That's what makes characters interesting, the mystery, the mystique of it all. I personally did not like the idea of shade for numerous reasons. I put all that in a video that I made, I think in January? Forgive me, as I was saying, so like I was saying, I have a video on shade and my issues with the character that I made, I believe, in January, if you are so inclined to watch. Continuing, everyone at Marvel shrugged off 2 years of goodwill and acted like I'd coordinated behind their backs on an announcement that made headlines. Beyond mentioning on Instagram the queens who inspired the character, I didn't coordinate crap. I didn't coordinate S. Of course, their head publicist can't admit that my quotes were pre-approved from an unreleased unreleased interview. You also can't prove it, Sina. You don't provide any proof. Right? But anyway, at this point, I stopped believing that there'd be any more work for me. There were so many shady moves on their end that I'm still having trouble putting into language. But it all aligned with an experience I had in retail where a corrupt manager kept lying and moving the goalposts in order to me. Maybe he means for me. I'll say for me. Maybe he just it's a typo. In order to keep me. Okay. Sorry. In order to keep me selling in a department I didn't want to work in. I offered to give Dark Veil a proper character bio, and I walked away. And here's what's interesting about this that you may not know. There was a few videos done about Dark Veil, about Shade, right? About the character's background. And what was interesting is that the character's background, has a background in retail, right? If I remember correctly, the character is a young African-American man, frustrated. You kind of know, like the whole young, dumb, and broke type of archetype, right? And he's working in a dead-end job, in some sort of retail store, like a perfume store or something like that. He gets into trouble. The trouble leads him to some sort of pocket dimension. He gets powers, shadow-based powers, and becomes Dark Veil, right? So again, Sina made this about him, right? He incorporated elements of, from what I can tell here, he incorporated elements of his own past, in particular his work in retail, to give this character backstory. Now, in general, I don't have anything against writers using their own backgrounds or being inspired by it. I mean, the old saying, write what you know. But again, this is, in my opinion, this is beyond Sina Grace writing what he knows. This is Sina Grace casting himself as Dark Veil, right? Maybe he doesn't have the skin tone, but to me, he's casting himself personality-wise, background-wise, as the character. Dark Veil is not in a element of his imagination, right? It's his self-insert character, right? Meant to represent, at least to me, right, all of Sina's angst and what he feels is unfair about his work experiences in life, right? That usually does not a good character make. But anyway, continuing. I recognize that some of my complaints can be filed under "this is freelance life." Oh, I filed it under you being petty and immature. But anyway, I am aware that it was not a queer person of color who joked to me that it's not a matter of if Marvel screws you over. He uses the F word, I don't want to say it. If Marvel screws you over, it's a matter of when. That came from a cis white male. I don't see the point of breaking up any of this racial or sex stuff. What does it matter if it wasn't a gay black woman? as I was saying, I don't understand where all of this, what it matters that it was a cis white man who said this to him, and not a queer black woman. I don't, or queer person of color, I should say. It doesn't automatically mean black. So I don't understand why he brings this up, or what it has to do with anything. Same day turnarounds. Oh, getting back to the article. Sorry. The same day turnarounds without warning. The work emails on Christmas break. That's the freelance BS. Truly, I don't even think of this as discrimination. I call it general ineptness. And I call what you're doing, Sina, pettiness. But anyway, continuing. It is my belief that if we are telling stories about heroes doing the right thing in the face of adversity, wouldn't the hope be to embody those ideals as individuals? I agree and disagree with him here. I actually agree on its face with what he's saying here. You would hope that if people are writing superhero stories, they would embody those ideals. But as we've all seen with Mark Waid, if you've been following that, you know that, or Mark Waid is one example. The Vic Mignogna situation, in particular, voice actors such as Monica Rial and Christopher Sabat and Sean Schimmel, right? They have really shown themselves to not be nice people, to say the least. So if you're familiar with that situation, or if you're on the comic side and you're familiar with Mark Waid and his alleged tortious interference against diversity in comics, aka Richard Meyer, aka your boy Zach, aka diversity in comics, aka Comics Matter, then yeah, you're no doubt aware of the fact that the people who write these characters can be colossal jerks. So what he says here himself, I actually agree with. What I disagree with is when he talks about telling stories about heroes doing the right things in the face of adversity. You didn't write that story, Sina Grace. I read issues of Iceman. I saw reviews of Iceman. I can't think of one issue where you showed Bobby being a hero and doing something good or right or just in the face of adversity. You didn't write that. So again, stop lying to yourself and telling yourself that you did. You didn't. Excuse me. Back to the article. Instead of feeling like I worked with some of the most inspiring and brave people in comics, I was surrounded by cowards. Ooh, that is harsh. But here's the thing, Sina. I think that if you want the biggest coward of all, you should look in the mirror. But anyway, it concludes, truly, I hate writing this. In keeping with Pride Month, I am proud of the work I did on Iceman. I love the book. It sucks that I may be tarnishing its legacy going public about how the cookies were made. That said, the time for self-congratulating is over, and folks should be earnestly listening when they ask, what could we have done better? No, what I ask is, why did it have to happen to Bobby? Why couldn't you be a better writer? Why are you so petty and childish? And why did you take the worst traits of yourself and transplant them onto Bobby Drake and now onto the character of Shade? Those are the questions I'm asking. But then again, I'm just a longtime geek. So I'm probably not going to get those questions answered. And here's the thing, Bobby. Here's the thing. I don't see where you're self-congratulatory. I don't see where your work on Iceman is anything to be proud about. You're a gay man who wrote a gay character. That's it. You did nothing special with the character. You didn't take him on some journey or some character changing or character defining arc. Okay, you didn't write something like, say Wolverine's backstory where he learns more about his past. You didn't write something like the issues of the X-Men where Storm became leader and then had to deal with the pressures of leadership and how that brought her into conflict with herself, with her darker nature and her more pacifistic side, right? You didn't do anything as iconic as, say, Mohawk Storm or anything of that nature. You wrote 2 comic series that had short runs that didn't do all that well, and you want to paint yourself in this article like you were somehow mistreated. I honestly don't see, Mr. Grace, where you were mistreated. You talk about that you were told not to be too gay, yet by your own admission you introduced a drag queen superhero. I'm not sure you can get much more gay than that. And I don't say that to be me, I just say it because that's the way I see it. You were given 2 chances to make this work, and you blew it. You were given the chance to write a Wolverine story. Or not a story, I should take that back. He said it was 6 pages. But still, you got to write a little bit of filler dialogue, 6 pages worth, right, for a version of Wolverine, one of Marvel's most popular and enduring characters. You get to write something, anything, for any version of him, and you decide to basically pout and go, well, it's still the gay character. I know that he's hetero and everything, but he's still the gay character. I can see why. I don't know if you left. You say you left. I don't know if you left or if Marvel let you go, but I can see why this relationship ended. You are a prissy little boy, right? You are a petty, immature little boy. You didn't get your way, and now, like the 5-year-old you still are inside, you want to sit here and you want to pout. And you want to try to paint yourself as the stifled creative. You're not the stifled creative. You're average. You're mediocre. You did nothing special, but you want to be treated like you're Chris Claremont. My man, you are not Chris Claremont. Now, despite how rough I've been, I do wish Mr. Grace well. I wish him well, and I hope he improves. I hope that he finds work elsewhere, but most importantly, I hope he improves, because if every character he writes is just Bobby with a different name, with a different skin, he's not going to go anywhere. But if he improves, all the power to him. Believe it or not, I don't wish him well. I don't want to... Sorry. Let me take that back. I do wish him well. Make that clear. Despite everything, I do wish him well. I don't wish him ill. I do wish him well. I just don't ever want to see him put his pen near Bobby Drake again. But anyway, this has gone on way too long, but this is the video, you know. Let me know what you think, if you're able to actually sit through it all. And I'll see you in the next one. Have a good day, everybody. Bye.